I'm taking half your millions, including your grandmother's estate, Darren said, with the confidence of a man announcing a sports score, not trying to gut someone's life. His voice echoed off the courtroom walls, smooth and unbothered, while mine stayed buried in my throat. The moment he said it, I knew the performance had begun. His final act of entitlement. I didn't flinch. I didn't cry. I sat straight, the way my grandmother always told me to in storms, hands still, chin high, heart silent. My name is Evelyn Hartman. I'm 45 years old. And if you had told me 5 years ago that I'd be sitting in a Nashville courtroom watching my husband attempt a hostile takeover of my life's work and my grandmother's legacy, I would have laughed. But here I was, staring down the man who once claimed to love me, while he tried to bleed me dry. Across the room, Darren slouched in his chair like the money was already wired into his account. His navy suit, tailored, no doubt, with my credit card, fit him like armor, and that gelled hair he once styled, just to impress me, now looked cartoonish. "Your Honor," his attorney purred. "My client seeks a fair division of assets, including the considerable inheritance Mrs. Hartman received during the marriage." I looked at the attorney's swollen briefcase, probably stuffed with spreadsheets and strategies. Legal gymnastics aimed at rewriting history, making my grandmother's sacrifice look like marital property. The courtroom was silent, but charged. I saw it in their posture. Reporters, spectators, even the bailiff, all leaning in, waiting to see if the rich wife would fold under pressure. Somewhere behind me, I could almost hear the math being done. Whispers, scribbled notes, half smirks. How much would Darren walk away with? What would the headlines say tomorrow? Prominent businesswoman loses millions in shocking divorce settlement? I could feel their doubt pressing down on me. But what they didn't know, and what Darren had forgotten, was that while he was busy calculating what he thought he could take, he'd overlooked one document. One decision I made years ago. One thing I never trusted him enough to share. That missing variable was about to change everything. Reporters had started gathering before the judge even entered, their whispers like vultures circling a carcass. All of them hoping to catch the fall of a millionaire. But what they didn't know, what no one in that courtroom knew yet, was that I hadn't come to be picked apart. I'd come to end the performance. Judge Mallory Crane, silver-haired and sharp-eyed, scanned the opening paperwork with the calm of a woman who'd seen hundreds of divorces. She looked like the kind of judge who rarely blinked twice. But as I sat there, silently gripping the purse in my lap, I had a quiet certainty. She hadn't seen this coming. Not what I was about to hand her. Not the twist I'd hidden for years. Across the aisle, Darren grinned like a man flipping the final card in a poker game he thought he'd already won. His sleek, custom suit, bought with my money, naturally, matched the confidence in his eyes. But behind that grin was the same man who once whispered he'd love me forever. The same man who used to bring me coffee in bed. The same man who, 5 years ago, signed something he thought didn't matter. The room felt suffocating. Heavy wood walls, stale legal air, and the weight of everyone's eyes. Outside, life kept moving. Cars passed. People ordered lattes. Business meetings ticked on. But inside this courtroom, my life was being sliced open. I felt the edge of the envelope inside my bag. The one I'd kept untouched until today. The one that would determine whether I left this courtroom with justice or regret. "Mrs. Hartman," Judge Crane said, her voice cutting through the noise. "Do you have a response to these claims?" I stood slowly, feeling the courtroom tilt slightly under the weight of what was coming. "Yes, Your Honor." "I do. But first, there's something the court needs to see." And with that sentence, I stepped into a moment I'd been preparing for since the day I realized Darren wasn't who he claimed to be. But I didn't always know. Once upon a time, I was just a tired, grieving woman with a growing business and a hole in my heart. We met at a Memphis conference. I was managing Eastwell Strategy Partners and mourning the loss of my grandmother, the only person who ever truly understood me. Darren was charming, supportive, and eerily good at saying the right things. "You're brilliant," he told me as I sifted through client reports. "I've never seen anyone turn numbers into art." I thought he saw me, but now I realize he was only ever counting. Looking back, I don't think Darren ever truly fell in love with me. What he fell in love with was my balance sheet. I just didn't know it at the time. In those early months, it felt like a dream. Our romance unfolded in a haze of candlelit dinners, weekend escapes, and spontaneous gifts. Darren worked as a pharmaceutical sales manager, yet he always seemed to have money for luxury. Limos, imported wine, boutique hotels. "I believe in investing in the people I care about," he'd say when I hesitated at the extravagance. I was flattered, but I see it now for what it was, a different kind of investment strategy. One where I was the long-term asset. 8 months in, he proposed. My gut hesitated. My grandmother had always warned me, "Be careful with men who move too fast. They're usually trying to outrun something." Darren, of course, had an answer for that too. "Life's too short to wait," he said, his hands wrapped around mine. "I know what I want, and I want you." The proposal was straight out of a movie. A private dinner cruise, a live quartet playing our favorite songs, and a ring that gleamed like a down payment on a house. It was beautiful, almost too beautiful. That's when I called Patricia, my attorney and longtime advisor. "You need a prenup," she said without blinking. "You've built something." Protect it. She was right, of course, but bringing it up to Darren? That made my stomach twist. I braced for offense, suspicion. Some glimpse of the controlling man my grandmother always feared I'd fall for. But Darren laughed, shrugged, kissed my forehead. "Of course, darling. Whatever makes you feel safe. I'm not marrying you for your money. I'm marrying you for you." Then he signed the document without even reading it. "It's just a romantic formality," he joked, pen flying across the page, "like wedding vows, but with more commas." His casual confidence melted my doubts. I actually remember feeling proud of how mature we were. Patricia had drafted everything carefully, protecting not just my existing firm and assets, but any future growth, windfalls, or inheritances. "Your grandmother's estate will eventually come to you," she reminded me. "This agreement ensures it stays in your family." I'd smiled, thinking she was being overly cautious. She wasn't. 18 months later, I got the call that changed everything. My grandmother had passed and left me everything: her home, her stock portfolio, her rare book collection, and $2.8 million in meticulously managed assets. It was more than I'd ever expected, and it shifted my financial life overnight. I told Darren that evening, expecting shared tears, maybe a toast in her memory. But instead, I saw something else. His eyes lit up, not with grief, not even with surprise, but with greed. $2.8 million? He repeated, almost in awe. "Evelyn, we're rich." That word, "we," should have stopped me cold. But it didn't. Not yet. From that moment on, the man I married began to vanish. He quit his job within 6 months, claiming he wanted to support me more fully and pursue new ideas. What he actually did was spend my inheritance like it came with his name on it. Darren didn't support my success. He spent it. Like my inheritance came with his name on the account and no expiration date. It started small. A new car, supposedly for business networking. A sleek import with custom detailing that screamed flash, not function. Then came a $30,000 investment in his friend's failing restaurant, done without even mentioning it to me. That money vanished in under a year. Next were the lavish vacations, the private golf club membership, the designer clothes. He styled himself like old money, pretending he'd earned it rather than married into it. Every time I dared question his spending, Darren would fix me with that practiced look and say, "We're a team, Evelyn." Couples should trust each other's financial decisions. But trust, real trust, is built on truth. And Darren was carefully building a lie. 6 months ago, I found out he'd been introducing himself at the country club as an independent investor, talking about our money like it had always been his. He'd even referred to my inheritance as family funds, conveniently skipping over the fact that the family he was referring to was my grandmother. The same woman he'd never met before the will came through. I should have walked then. But instead, I asked him why. Why the lies? And that's when the mask came off. "You act like it's some big secret that I married up," Darren snapped. "Everyone knows you were just a lonely workaholic. I gave your life some meaning." His words hit like a slap, not because they were completely false, but because there was a cruel sliver of truth. I had been lonely, and Darren knew exactly how to fill that void. He didn't just stumble into my life. He studied it. He played the part of the savior while plotting to become the sole beneficiary of everything I held dear. I might have still held on, rationalized, forgiven, endured, until I opened his email. There it was, digital proof. Months of back and forth between Darren and a divorce attorney. Strategy memos, legal briefs, research into Tennessee asset division laws. He'd been planning his exit, right down to the filing timeline, maximizing his shot at a multi-million-dollar payout. He even tried to build a case around emotional support and lifestyle contributions, as if his lies, spending, and manipulation were some kind of gift I should be grateful for. That's when I called Patricia. Not to ask for help, not this time. I called her to file, to take back the narrative. I wouldn't wait for Darren to blindside me. I'd seen enough. If he wanted to go to war over my grandmother's money, then fine, he could try. But he'd soon realize he'd underestimated one thing. I never bet blind. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't slam the table. I simply reached into my purse and pulled out the end of Darren's illusion. The courtroom seemed to freeze. The hum of the air conditioner, the rustle of my envelope's paper flap, even the slight squeak of my shoes as I stepped toward the judge's bench. It all echoed louder than Darren's earlier threats. After months of planning, Patricia and I had timed this moment down to the second. I was done being quiet. This envelope, it had sat untouched for years, hidden in plain sight. Darren had once called it just a formality. He was about to learn what formalities can do. "Your Honor," I said, my voice steady like steel, "I believe the court needs to review this document before proceeding with any asset division." Judge Crane extended her hand calmly, taking the envelope like she already knew what storm it carried. "And what is the nature of this document, Mrs. Hartman?" "It's a prenuptial agreement, Your Honor. Signed by my husband 5 years ago." The shift was instant. It was like someone had pulled a lever and drained all the smug out of Darren's face. His attorney, a lean, pale man named Gerald Weston, shot to his feet as if jolted by electricity. "Your Honor, we were not informed of any prenup. This is highly irregular." "Sit down, Mr. Weston," Judge Crane said, cracking the envelope seal. "I'll determine the validity." I returned to my seat, not looking at Darren, but fully aware of his unraveling. His voice had lost its courtroom bravado and dropped into frantic whispers. "She never mentioned this. How is this possible?" Beside me, Patricia remained the portrait of calm power. She leaned in slightly and whispered, "Just watch." Judge Crane didn't rush. She read every page like she was carving them in stone. The document was airtight. Patricia had seen to that. It detailed asset protections, debt separation, and most crucially, the clause Darren thought didn't exist: how future inheritance would be handled. "This appears to be a properly executed prenuptial agreement," Judge Crane finally said, her voice crisp. "Dated 6 weeks prior to the marriage, witnessed by 2 notaries, signed by both parties." Darren's attorney visibly wilted. I realized in that moment he hadn't even looked for a prenup before filing. Just like Darren, he assumed I had nothing to protect, that I wouldn't dare defend myself. Darren stood up abruptly, voice cracking. I need to see that document. I don't remember signing anything like that." Judge Crane raised an eyebrow, unimpressed. And for the first time since this entire charade began, Darren looked scared, not of losing money, but of losing control. "Mr. Hartman, sit down," Judge Crane said sharply. But Darren didn't move. His spiral had already begun. His posture sagged, the confidence gone from his shoulders. The man who once strutted into this courtroom like he owned it now looked like he couldn't find the exit fast enough. "Evelyn, what is this?" he stammered, his voice loud enough to echo. "You never told me this was some kind of legal trap." Trap. That word stuck with me. Not agreement, not contract. He saw the truth, finally, and called it a trap, as if protecting what was mine had somehow been a betrayal. "Mr. Hartman," Judge Crane's voice snapped like a wire. "One more outburst, and I will hold you in contempt. Your attorney may review the document through proper legal channels. You will remain silent." Gerald Weston approached the bench slowly, like a man walking into incoming fire. I watched his face shift with every page he read. First concern, then confusion, and finally panic. By the time he returned to Darren's side, he looked ready to dissolve into his chair. They began whispering, frantic, rapid fire, and Darren's hands started flying with wide, desperate gestures. I couldn't hear the words, but I didn't need to. The message was clear. He never told his lawyer about the prenup, just like he never told the truth about anything else. The courtroom leaned in. You could hear the reporters' pens scratching again, murmurs rippling across the gallery. This was no longer just a divorce. It was a spectacle. And Darren? He was the headliner. "Your Honor," Gerald finally said, voice no longer smooth. "My client requests a brief recess to review these documents." Judge Crane checked her watch, unimpressed. "Mr. Weston, did you fail to inquire about the existence of any prenuptial agreements prior to filing asset claims?" Gerald's silence was his answer. Darren hadn't just underestimated me. He'd underestimated the law, and the woman who knew how to use it. "I'll allow 10 minutes, Judge Crane said, already closing the folder. "But I must warn you, this appears to be a legally binding agreement that materially affects your client's claims." They huddled near the window like 2 boys who just realized they brought the wrong exam answers. Darren's voice rose in disbelief, his hands chopping the air while Gerald tried, unsuccessfully, to keep him calm. Even from my seat, I could see the moment Darren's heart sank. It was in the way he suddenly stopped moving, just froze, eyes wide, mouth slightly open. That was the moment he realized his scheme had collapsed. Patricia flipped calmly through her notes beside me. her pen tapping once against the margin. Next, he'll try to argue fraud or emotional manipulation, she whispered. They always do when the paperwork's airtight. And just like clockwork, court resumed, and Gerald stood. Your Honor, he began, already sweating. My client believes he was misled. He was told this was a romantic gesture, not a comprehensive asset protection agreement. And there it was, the opening move of Darren's last-ditch defense. Love, he claimed, had blinded him. But the only thing Darren had ever been blinded by was money. Judge Crane arched an eyebrow, not in surprise, but in barely concealed disdain. Mr. Weston, are you telling this court that your client signed a legal document without reading it? Gerald Weston straightened his tie, trying to maintain dignity. Your Honor, my client trusted his wife-to-be. He believed she was being honest about the document's intent. I had to clench my jaw to keep from laughing. Darren, the self-proclaimed deal-maker, the man who bragged about reading contracts for sport, was now being painted as a wide-eyed romantic who signed a prenup on faith alone. The irony was delicious. Judge Crane flipped a page. It's clearly labeled prenuptial agreement, Mr. Weston. It includes the standard advisement about seeking independent legal counsel. Did your client waive that right? Gerald looked like he was fishing for a miracle. Yes, Your Honor, he waived it. And it was reviewed by a notary public, with your client present, confirming his identity? Yes, Your Honor. Then came the silence, the kind that grows teeth. Judge Crane looked directly at Darren. Mr. Hartman, when you signed this document, were you under duress? Was anyone forcing you? His face flushed a deep red, equal parts humiliation and fury. No, Your Honor, he said, voice tight. But I thought it was just paperwork. Evelyn made it sound like it wasn't a big deal. The judge didn't blink. Did you read the document before signing it? The question floated in the air like a knife suspended mid-fall. Darren glanced around the courtroom like he was searching for an escape hatch. There wasn't one. Mr. Hartman, Judge Crane pressed, her tone now ice. Answer the question. I skimmed it, he admitted, eyes narrowing in my direction. Evelyn said it was just a formality. Judge Crane's expression didn't shift an inch, but her voice dropped lower, sharper. Mr. Hartman, you signed a legally binding contract without reading it. You waived your right to legal counsel, and now you want this court to invalidate the agreement because you didn't take it seriously? The room was dead silent. Even the reporters had stopped writing. I watched Darren squirm, trapped under the weight of his own carelessness. For a man who'd styled himself as a master manipulator, he had just admitted, on record, to negligence, arrogance, and a lack of due diligence. Your Honor, Gerald tried one last time, voice trembling slightly. Perhaps we could argue that the agreement is unconscionable, given the financial disparity. Mr. Weston, Judge Crane cut in, already turning another page. Did you review the financial disclosures included in this agreement? Gerald hesitated, rifling through the packet like he could manifest a technicality out of thin air. There appear to be extensive disclosures. Indeed, she said, her voice now laced with finality. Mrs. Hartman provided full documentation of her assets, income, and projected inheritance. Your client signed acknowledgments confirming he reviewed and understood each section. Patricia had built that prenup like a fortress. We'd gone line by line, 5 years ago, sealing every potential crack Darren might one day try to slip through. And now, it was holding beautifully. This is one of the most thorough prenuptial agreements I've reviewed in 23 years on this bench, Judge Crane said, her voice clear as a bell. Darren went pale. The golden boy who'd smooth-talked his way through life had just hit a wall made of his own signature. Judge Crane cleared her throat. Then, slowly and deliberately, she began reading aloud from the agreement. Her voice carried across the courtroom like a verdict. Section 4, Paragraph A. Judge Crane read aloud, her voice slicing through the room. All assets owned by either party prior to marriage shall remain the separate property of that party. Then came the real blow. Section 4, Paragraph B. Any inheritance received by either party during the marriage shall be considered separate property and shall not be subject to division upon divorce. Across the courtroom, Darren's skin flushed crimson, then drained to a ghostly white, then took on a pale green tinge as the weight of it sank in. His hands clutched the edge of the table until his knuckles turned bone white. That can't be legal, he mumbled, loud enough for nearby spectators and reporters to catch every desperate word. Judge Crane continued without flinching. Section 6, Spousal Support. Neither party shall be entitled to alimony or spousal support from the other, regardless of the length of the marriage or disparity in income. She glanced up over the rim of her reading glasses. This section was initialed by both parties. Witnessed, separately. Gerald Weston was now scribbling furiously, clearly trying to unearth some oversight. But there wasn't one. Patricia had made sure of that 5 years ago. We'd gone line by line, imagining every scenario, every loophole closed, every clause accounted for. I stood, calm, intentional. Your Honor, may I address the court? Proceed, Mrs. Hartman. When I inherited my grandmother's estate 18 months ago, I began, keeping my voice clear. I consulted with my attorney to confirm its protection under the prenup. It was, as you've now seen, explicitly covered under Section 4, Paragraph B. The funds have been maintained in separate accounts and have never been commingled with marital assets. That was the nail. Not just in Darren's financial coffin, but in the illusion he'd built of being owed something. I wasn't careless. I was deliberate, and that prenup wasn't just ironclad. It was a vault. Judge Crane nodded, impressed. Mrs. Hartman, did you use any portion of your inheritance for household or joint expenses? No, Your Honor. All household costs came from my salary. The inheritance remained untouched. That's when Darren snapped. That's not true, he shouted, practically leaping from his seat. She bought stuff for us. Paid for the vacations! Mr. Hartman, Judge Crane said, her tone turning frigid. You are out of order. Sit down immediately. But it was too late. He was unraveling in front of everyone, the reporters, the judge, the spectators. His polished image crumbled before our eyes. This is insane, he shouted. I've been with her for 5 years. I supported her emotionally. I gave up my career for this relationship. You quit your job, I said quietly, no longer able to resist. To spend my money. Mrs. Hartman, Judge Crane warned, though the corners of her mouth hinted at amusement. Gerald Weston tried to pull Darren down by the sleeve, whispering furiously, but Darren was fully unraveling now. She trapped me, he bellowed. She made me believe we were building a life together. That the money was ours. Mr. Hartman, Judge Crane's voice cut through the chaos like a blade. If you cannot compose yourself, I will instruct the bailiff to remove you from this courtroom. That threat, real, cold, and final, landed where nothing else had. Darren dropped back into his chair, chest heaving, face mottled with rage. But the damage? It was done. Everyone in that courtroom saw it. Not just the legal loss, but the man himself. Stripped of charm, stripped of pretense. Greedy, entitled. A gold digger who'd married into legacy and then cried victim when the vault was locked shut. Judge Crane turned the final page of the prenup with meticulous care, as if closing the last chapter of a tragic novel. The air was heavy, so still it almost rang. Everyone was waiting, breath held, for the hammer to fall. I wasn't nervous. Not anymore. After everything Darren had tried, his schemes, his arrogance, the lies, I felt something rare and steady settle inside me. Peace. Because now, the truth was no longer just mine to carry. Judge Crane folded her reading glasses and looked straight at Darren, her expression glacial. Mr. Hartman, this prenuptial agreement is valid, comprehensive, and legally binding. You are entitled to exactly nothing from your wife's premarital assets, her inheritance, or her business holdings. The word hit him like a brick. Nothing. His jaw went slack, his eyes wide with disbelief. Nothing, he repeated under his breath, as if saying it aloud might change the outcome. Nothing, Judge Crane confirmed without pause. And furthermore, under Section 7 of this agreement, all debts incurred individually by either party remain the responsibility of that party. Mrs. Hartman, do you have documentation of those debts? I nodded. Patricia handed over a thick binder, neatly tabbed and sorted. I passed it to the bailiff without ceremony. Yes, Your Honor. We've outlined credit card balances, the car loan, the failed restaurant investment, and unpaid country club dues. The total comes to approximately $87,000, all accumulated by Mr. Hartman. Gerald Weston looked like he might dissolve into his chair. What was supposed to be his big payday had turned into a public implosion, a reputational wipeout. Mr. Hartman, Judge Crane continued, her voice cutting through the whispers already rippling across the courtroom. Not only will you receive no assets from this divorce, you are personally responsible for $87,000 in debt. The gallery erupted, murmurs, audible gasps, even the muffled sound of someone stifling a laugh behind me. Darren had walked into court expecting to leave a millionaire. Now he was staring down bankruptcy in under 30 minutes. His voice was faint, cracked. Your Honor, this can't be right. 5 years of marriage has to count for something. Judge Crane looked at him with the calm, cold clarity of someone delivering a long overdue lesson. It does count for something, Mr. Hartman, Judge Crane said, her voice calm but razor sharp. It counts as an expensive lesson in reading legal documents before signing them. Then came the gavel, one clean, echoing crack that shook the courtroom like thunder. This court grants the divorce petition filed by Mrs. Hartman, she declared. No assets shall be transferred to Mr. Hartman. All individual debts remain the responsibility of the party who incurred them. Court is adjourned. Darren didn't move. He sat frozen in place, stunned into silence as the full weight of the ruling dropped onto his shoulders. 5 years of positioning, manipulation, and deceit, undone by one document he never took seriously. People began filing out, quietly, quickly, like witnesses leaving a finished play. I remained in my seat, letting the moment wash over me. Gerald Weston packed his briefcase with the urgency of a man hoping no one remembered his name. A few reporters started toward me, pens and microphones at the ready, but Patricia stepped between us like a seasoned bodyguard. We didn't need headlines. We already had the truth. Evelyn, Darren called out, his voice low, desperate. We need to talk. This isn't over. I turned to face him one last time. Calm, resolved, It was over, I said softly, the moment you chose my money over me. The prenup didn't ruin your plan, Darren. Your greed did. His face cracked then, like someone waking up mid-fall. No assets, no inheritance, just a pile of debt and the ruins of a carefully rehearsed life. Darren had charmed his way through every room, every dinner party, every lie. But now, there was no one left to fool. As I walked toward the courtroom doors, Patricia by my side, I felt lighter than I had in years. The nightmare wasn't just ending. It had ended. The truth was no longer whispered behind closed doors. It had been spoken aloud, under oath, for all to see. Justice, I realized, doesn't always come with sirens or spotlights. Sometimes it arrives in silence, with paperwork, with patience, with one woman choosing not to be taken. Darren's life unraveled quickly after that. The $87,000 in debt dragged him into bankruptcy within 6 months. His credit destroyed, his reputation scorched. Word spread fast in Nashville's business circles about the man who tried to con his wife out of her inheritance. He became a cautionary tale. The country club revoked his membership when he defaulted on his dues. His luxury car was repossessed, replaced by late buses and borrowed rides. His dating life vanished as quickly as his bank account. Once women learned what he'd done, they warned each other. No one wanted to be his next investment. Eventually, he moved back in with his aging parents in Memphis, taking a job in entry-level sales. At 47, his dream of living off someone else's legacy had finally died. As for me, I used a portion of my protected inheritance to launch the Hartman Foundation, a nonprofit providing legal aid for women seeking prenuptial protection and divorce representation. I wanted other women to be ready before the storm. Looking back, I see it clearly now. My grandmother hadn't just left me money, she left me armor. Her wisdom and Patricia's guidance saved me from more than just financial ruin. They saved me from a life spent being used by someone who never saw me, only what I could give. And in the end, what Darren took from me didn't matter. What I kept and who I became, that was priceless. For a long time, I believed the greatest risk in love was losing someone. Now I understand. The real danger is losing yourself in someone who never saw your worth to begin with. Darren taught me that, not through love, but through his absence of it. The courtroom didn't just deliver a verdict that day. It delivered clarity about what love is not, about what strength truly looks like, and about how sometimes the most strategic thing a woman can do is quietly prepare and wait. So no, I didn't win because I fought louder. I won because I planned better. I protected myself. I trusted my instincts. And when the time came, I didn't just survive him, I outlived him.